Last week we made a move, a switch in our thinking from thinking about individuals and personal issues to groups, okay, and issues between groups, or issues that a person has, a character has, because they're a member of a group. All right, that's a switch we made last week. We're going to continue our thinking with that today. And we want to figure out how issues are related to power and imbalances of power between groups. So what do you think I mean by imbalance of power between groups? What does that mean? What do you think? Anybody want to just respond? We say imbalance of power, like this. An imbalance of power. What's it mean? Right, so one group has more power than the other. For example, age and birth order. So in a family, in a typical Korean family, which child has the most power? The first one, right? The first son has lots of responsibilities, right? And essentially more power than anyone else. Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. It depends on who that person is, right? But power is not the same, right? If you're the last child, you're the first child, you're the middle, it's a little different, right? So, we're going to look at that today, and I'm going to kind of model the thinking that we should be doing as we investigate the balance of power in these groups. So think back to Francisco, remember? We read the story. Hey, Miss Al.
Hi, Mr. Argo.
See? Friendship. You're on camera, say hello.
No, I don't want to be on camera.
That. See? Positive relationship. I've read lots of books and learned how to make myself a better person. Now, we're going to think about these relationships. We need to think about Francisco. So we read the story last week about his first day of school and how it was horrible. He gets headaches. When he falls asleep, he hears the teacher's voice, Miss Scalapino. Ethan, do you hear my voice when you go to sleep?
Yeah.
No. I hope you're lying.
When I actually fall asleep, I won't hear you.
Good. Now, we can imagine how Francisco feels, right? He talks about being in the classroom and understanding nothing. So what I've identified, well, first, I'm just going to read you the section. And I want you to identify two groups. Okay? Francisco's group and the teacher's group. And based on the short section I read, I want you to tell me what they are. Okay? So, here we go. Miss Scalapino started speaking to the class, and I did not understand a word she was saying. The more she spoke, the more anxious I became. By the end of the day, I was very tired of hearing Miss Scalapino talk because the sounds made no sense to me. I thought that perhaps by paying close attention, I would begin to understand, but I did not. I only got a headache. And that night, when I went to bed, I heard her voice in my head. Now, what are the groups there that we see? What group is, this is an issue, right? He's got a problem in school. He can't understand anything. Right? So, Jim, what group does Francisco belong to that may be related to this problem? That's right. He's a Spanish speaker. And what group does Miss Scalapino belong to?
English speaker college.
English, right? Now, which group has more power in this scene?
The English speaker.
English speaker, right? Because this is a school in the United States. Now, here we got to think, we got to balance. Say Spanish speaker, English, Miss Scalapino. So English has more power here. Right? English has more power in this situation. Now, the sad thing is, the person in power, Miss Scalapino, is responsible for what Francisco learns. But she doesn't, as we read in the story, she doesn't seem too concerned about that. She doesn't act as if it's her responsibility. Right? So we have to ask ourselves, we've identified this power imbalance. So now we got to look for effects. So here I got short term, long term. So let's think. He's in class, it's an English class. He's in the U.S. Teacher speaks English. He understands nothing. The words don't make sense to me, is what he says. It makes him anxious. So what are the short-term effects of this power imbalance? Well, to figure this out, I got to go back to the story. All right, because we need, if we're going to say there's a short-term effect, we want some real evidence from the book. So, he doesn't understand, the more anxious I became. So here I'm going to write anxious. A short-term effect is him being anxious. The words made no sense to me. I only got a headache. I heard her voice in my head. So, the short-term effects are headache, right? Anxious. Later in the story, we learn that he develops a way to cope in class. What does he do? How does he manage to avoid the headaches? What's he do? Remember, he floated out the window and visited his dad on the farm. Have you guys ever floated out of this window? When we've had a long mini lesson, did you ever float out of the window? I hope not. But one of the short-term effects is he daydreams, right? So he disconnects himself from the class. Right? Now, what's the long-term effect of that? What's going to happen if he disconnects himself from the class? Stella, he keeps doing it over and over. He keeps daydreaming. He feels anxious. What's going to happen to him? What? Well, detention.
He can't follow the school education.
Yeah, he's not going to get a good education. He will have low self-esteem. He might begin to think it's his fault that he doesn't understand. When really it's the schools, because they're not doing anything to support him. Right? The one friend he has that speaks Spanish, Miss Scalapino yells at him, Arthur. So the long-term effect could be low self-esteem, and maybe dropout. So it could be the case that Francisco goes to school until maybe grade 8 or 9, and then realizes he could work on the farm with his dad to make money instead of going to school and daydreaming all day. And he goes right to work as soon as he's old enough, like 14. Okay? So that's like a long-term effect of this power imbalance. So what I want you to try now, in your book, put group, you identify two groups, and you circle the one that has more power. Second, you identify short-term effects of that power imbalance. And that should be something you find in your book, something you can see and touch. And then you kind of predict some long-term effects. So you're going to talk with the partner in your group, and you need to discuss the same book. I know some groups have several books. So make sure you talk about a character that you've, from a book that you've both read. And I want to give you 2 minutes. 2 minutes to talk about this, and then I'll ask you to share. You ready to go? Go. Mark, who are you talking to? You're in Chloe. Lauren, right? Lauren, you gotta talk to Jeff. You wanna come over here? Gina, you're talking to Stella and Goo. Coo, it's not Keel. It's not Pine Keel. Ooh, like 9. Ooh. Anyway, the three of you have to talk together. I didn't hear anything. I don't see anything in your notebooks. Which book? Zinkoff. Who's your character? What group is he in? Fill it out. How are we doing over here? Say, John, talk to me. You talking about Blubber? Katie, can you hit the button on the timer?
Jim can help someone who Linda. I think he's just like worried about he getting movie too.
Okay. Anybody want to share? I want to hear, what are the two groups? What's the power balance like? What are the short-term effects of that imbalance, and what are the long-term effects? Anybody want to share real quick before we go? You want to share? You guys said you were done. Gina, you want to share? Talk about Zinkoff. Tell us what group he's in. So he's a student, and with what other group is there a power imbalance? You want to help, Eva? So students and teachers have more power. And what is a short-term effect of that imbalance for Zinkoff? He's cheerful. Is his cheeriness caused by the imbalance of power between teacher and student? Well, I think what we need to do, right, when you look for these imbalances, you start with an issue the character has. Okay, because if he's cheery, there's no issue. Know what I mean? So we need to start with when there's a problem. That's where our investigation of that problem begins. Then we look at these things. Okay? So we think about a group the character's part of. Then, where is there an imbalance of power for this group? And then what effects might that have? Okay, so the key is identify the issue first. When the character faces a problem, then we look for power imbalance. Okay? So as you work today, I suggest you continue with these little charts in your book, okay, to think about your characters. Any questions? Does anyone need a new book? You should. You had a whole weekend to read. No new books? Okay. Head back to your desks. You guys, you can stay on the carpets and sofa today.
아, 진짜. 아, 그래.